seen, there won't be any cross bike riding this week. Just taking it to my local bike shop, Bike Style, who I use for all of my kind of local jobs. I take my my race bikes and the more important kind of jobs that I wouldn't trust anyone to them robbing to Robin Cycle Services in Bristol, who you've seen before. And now I'm just off to go and shoot the time lapses that you saw at the beginning of the video. So these are time lapses that I've been shooting for the MA course that I teach at university. It's all online now, but I thought I'd show a couple of different views of Clevedon that you maybe don't normally see. So the quick stuff, the training for this week, down to 106.1 kilos, weight's coming off great, still eating brilliant, still feeling fantastic. Did 12 kilometers of running, nice and easy. The whole point of this at the minute with the running is to take it nice and easy. And I've done 8 hours on the bike. So 6 hours on Zwift, mixture of kind of VO2 max, doing some climbing on that mountain that I can never remember the name of, sort of fixed what rides, that kind of stuff. A mixture of training anyway, nearly all group rides. Enjoying it a little bit, but I have to say that I had to take a break halfway through the week to get out on the bike. I think I've kind of figured it out with Zwift for me, is that it's a great means to an end. It's absolutely brilliant tool to be able to use, but I can only do it if I can get out and ride my bike outside. Now, the cross bike, as you've seen already, is in the hospital. I couldn't get one side of the bottom bracket cup off, so I had to take it to Phil, who's taken that off. I've got the bike back, got to rebuild it now. So new bottom bracket, get everything fixed back on, wax the chain, all that kind of stuff. But because I couldn't do that on the cross bike this week, it meant I went out on the road bike. So I did 2 hours on the road bike, and the government regulations at the minute for riding your road bike are pretty difficult to follow. So I'm going to read directly off the British Cycling website that tells you exactly how you're able to ride outside at the moment with the COVID restrictions being in lockdown. So it says on British Cycling, under new restrictions, you're permitted to cycle, and we would encourage you to do so whilst following these rules. You should only ride alone, with your household support bubble or one other person. Okay, good. Stay local, ride within your limits, and ensure you're self-sufficient. Stay local's a problem, isn't it, with that one? We'll come back to that. Leave the house to exercise only once each day. Keep a safe distance from others and practice good respiratory hygiene, i.e. no spitting or use a tissue. You should only leave your house to exercise and not for the purpose of leisure, such as a picnic or a coffee break. And if you need to travel, such as to go to work or to the shops, you're encouraged to cycle where possible. Okay, so far so good. So this part about what does it mean by local? Let's read what that says, because this is the important thing where it's really vague. We know many of you want to know what is meant by staying local. The government definition of this is stated as your village, town or part of the city that you live in. We'll come back to that because I don't think that makes much sense. We understand that this definition is particularly restrictive for cycling, and we are working to seek further clarification on this. On Thursday the 14th of January, we wrote to the government alongside British Triathlon and Cycling UK. Following the continued confusion over this matter, we hope to provide an update shortly. In the meantime, we recommend you follow the advice to stay local, ride within your ability and ensure that you're self-sufficient. So if you live in a village such as Tickenham, which is one of the villages between where I live and Bristol, it's basically one long road, and it's a main road, and basically you're supposed to be able to ride on that. That seems to be the government indication. So I decided for my 2 hour bike ride, I was going to see just how difficult it was or easy it was to ride for 2 hours without going any further than 2 kilometers away from my front door and without leaving the outer roads of the town that I live in. So firstly, is that possible? Well, where I live, yes it is. I know I'm fortunate that I live in a relatively big town. I also live in a very beautiful town that's got coastal paths and hills and things like that. I've certainly lived in places in the past where that would be
less possible and less enjoyable. So I do count my blessings on that. But what I have done is put together a list of 5 pros and 5 cons to riding within your own town or village that I discovered anyway. So the first one is that it's not Zwift. You don't get any ride-ons, you don't have any Wi-Fi issues, you also don't have people riding through the back of you, there are no fences, there's no flyers, any of that stuff. You're outside hearing the swish of your tyres on the tarmac, you're getting some fresh air, you're getting some much needed vitamin D, and it just feels good to be outside. The con that I think of first of all is that one of the things that we fall in love with as kids when we get our first bikes is that ability to explore, the ability to get out and spread our wings and go far asunder and find things that are new. Obviously, when you're not able to do that and not able to leave your own town or village, then in that case, that does restrict the ability to explore. So pro number 2, well actually maybe the con of number 1 that I said about not being able to explore is a bit of a con in itself. You see, what I discovered, which was quite interesting, was that although I know the town back to front, it's because I've driven or walked or run nearly every road in this town. But that's not to say that I've ridden them. What you normally do when you go out for a bike ride is that you get out of your local area as quickly as possible. The quickest road out, onto the open road, off you go. What I've discovered is that there are a lot of roads where I live that I haven't ridden up and down. By sort of planning it roughly in my head, I managed to ride 360 meters of climbing in about 40 kilometers. I managed to ride up and down roads that I've never ridden up and down before, find hills that I've only run or walked or driven up before. So there is a way of exploring the area that perhaps you haven't done before. The con or the downside is the fact that you can't really kind of treat distance and speed as anything to kind of be a factor on it. It's got to be just time. A lot of the roads that you're on are going to be residential, lots of junctions, lots of people walking around. And on the side of that, there was one of the things that I noticed, which is a complete aside to this really, but one of the things that I did notice when I was out on my bike was as I was riding past the petrol station down the end of my road towards the sea, I overheard one couple commenting on how cheap the petrol is here. Which made me realise that they aren't from the local area. And also a couple getting out of a car saying that they needed a much needed coffee after that journey. Do try and stay local. The whole point of this is to kind of minimise the cross-contamination of anybody that is infected. Anyway, that is a bit of an aside. But because of that, because you're riding on residential streets, you can't base anything on speed. We've got a ring road here and we've got climbs. So I was basing any of my efforts on the ring road and when I was able to climb up stuff. Whereas normally, you know, you kind of base that, like you'd be able to be out on the open road and ride fast and hard for as long as you like. Not possible when you're riding in a local area. So that is one downside. So my third pro for this type of riding is it forces you to be creative. You've got to think about where you're going, planning your route so that you're not doing the same thing twice. I've actually come up with this idea that the next time I do this, I'm not allowed to ride the same direction down the same road twice. I'm allowed to come back on myself, but I'm not allowed to go the same direction. So that's going to be my plan next time. See how many hills I can get in without repeating what I'm doing. On the downside of this, of course, is that we're all going to be restricted, even if we live in a city, to a small area, and it's going to be something that is going to limit us. We're not going to have that much road before we start running out of time or distance to be able to do this. I certainly felt that 2 hours was pretty much my limit of being able to ride and do this this week. The fourth pro is something that I have mentioned time and time again about this. One of the biggest, most important things that I notice after a winter season is the people that have only ridden on their indoor trainers. Their bike handling pretty much sucks. One of the reasons why I've been riding my cross bike is to improve my bike handling and keep that side of things up. This will definitely keep your bike handling up together. However, on the con side of things, of course, with the weather the way it is at the minute, that is one of the downsides, is it is much, much riskier. I'm very careful about picking the time of day and looking at the weather conditions. We were really lucky in this week that we got a decent day that was quite cold, but all of the ice thawed out quite quickly. The following day, earlier today, it's actually started to snow. So of course there is that risk at this time of year of having an off and ending up with a broken collarbone or something, which is of course a big risk. The fifth and final one that I want to talk about is probably the most important one. Whether you agree with the government's approach to the whole COVID thing is not something I want to discuss in this video. However, it is what we've been asked to do, and it's all we can do to try and do our bit in this whole situation to stick within the rules. For me, it's something that I feel that I should be doing and not doing anything beyond that at the moment. The downside of this is the fact that the last con for me is going to be that it isn't something that I'm going to be able to do every single week. I think it will get quite tiresome quite quickly and quite boring trying to ride those same roads. Yes, I can try those same efforts over and over again and try and see if I can make improvements, but I think riding that same 40k route or a similar 40k route for 2 hours every week is just going to become incredibly boring. So I think the most important thing for me is to stop making this video right now and get my cross bike fixed.
Good, that's all fixed up. Have a good week. See you next week's video.